there's always a story, and I love to always ask the why. And people don't get to see the why when I get them on a podcast, but I asked the why. And your why was you went from a foster kid being kicked out of school to then you decided to lead a disaster response for FEMA. And now you're building systems, right, that see our kids beyond their trauma. And
Right.
it was a trauma. It was life experiences that we've had to encounter and overcome that really put you into the seat. Like when we kind of go back, like did you ever imagine yourself in the seat that you're in today?
No, I never had a life goal, and I never would have dreamt that I could become a CEO and a president of an organization. And
Mhm.
just frankly, I thought it was outside of my wheelhouse and my capability. And I say that because, as you mentioned, I was a byproduct of adoption and a foster care alum. So everything about what data and research says is possible in terms of success, the outcomes are not good and they're not promising. So what's interesting, though, I tell people is despite my trauma, I think it's been God's amazing grace and just the
Mhm.
transformative power, the healing power of community, that even though I was very broken and I was a wild child, I was so fortunate to be intersected with people. So, gatekeepers, mentors, coaches who saw something in me that I like to say was a spark. They became curious about me. I think they told themselves that what I'm seeing now, the broken, the misbehavior, it is not going to be the totality of her life. And so, in that, they leveraged their power, their privilege, their positionality, and they gave me a chance. So, as I was trying to heal, whether that was going through school or whether that was applying for jobs, I had individuals who opened doors for me that I would have never been able to open for myself.
Mhm.
And so those were people who said, I see something different and unique in you. And I was always hungry and gritty, and I was smart and I could learn fast. So as I healed, these people helped lift me, I think, to life and leadership. They took a gamble, they took a chance. They allowed me to heal. They created safety for me to heal, but they also gave me a platform to really go after some aggressive positions. And I just kind of, like a hungry person trying to survive and thrive, I climbed a ladder, but it wasn't without the help and the lift of those people, those champions of my village.
And today you're now what? What is your title and what's your organization
Yeah.
that you're with?
So I'm the president and CEO, the proud president and CEO of Cornerstones of Care. We're a 156-year-old behavioral health nonprofit organization. We're based out of Kansas City, Missouri. We serve about 16,000 children and families each year across Missouri and Kansas and beyond. And so the thread of our work is that we serve children and families who have had some type of intersection with trauma. We
Mhm.
want to prevent it. We want to help heal them from trauma, but give them tools, supports, therapeutic treatments, and services so that they can get on a pathway towards vibrant life, resilience, and recovery. We also do foster care and adoption. And so a lot of the children and families we work with have had some intersection with the child and family welfare system. But
Mhm.
our true north is keeping children and families safe, healthy, and whole together. My desire, my goal, my courageous must do is I don't want to see any child and family come into any system of any type unnecessarily. So if we can help them stabilize and heal what's broken, what's starting to break before a family has to become dismantled, that is what we want to be known for. And that's what we do at Cornerstones of Care.
I love that. And when we spoke the first time, you said you don't need perfect beginnings to lead. You need someone to believe beyond what's broken, and kind of
Correct.
what the space that you're in today,
Yeah,
right?
just a
Um,
little seed, if someone has the hope and say, I know there's potential beyond what I see today, that could totally transform a
yeah.
child's life, an adult's life. I think people think traumatized child results in traumatized adult that will never become changed, never become restored. I don't buy that. There's no child or family or life story that's so far gone that it cannot be rebuilt, repurposed, and restored.
Which is why it's so important to be mindful of the words you say, right?
Yes.
Because sometimes you could be in a broken moment and someone takes what you said
Mhm.
and run with it. And I've actually experienced that. I ain't gonna lie to you, where a friend, I guess I must in my 20s, I must have not had the same belief in God that I have today.
Mhm. Yeah.
And she, as we get older, she said, I remember when you said that you didn't believe in God. And I'm like, I said that? Like, there's no way I said that, right? But
Yeah.
that's going back to sometimes we're in broken moments and we say things that are not. us are not true.
Yes. Yeah.
So I've actually had to be mindful when I tell someone their small business. No, your business. Let me
That's right.
change the
That's right.
words, right? It is the words that truly change us. I remember I was early, maybe 19, 20 years old when I heard the words from the chief development officer at Subway. I was there, and the
Mm,
guy didn't know me, but he met me for a couple hours, got to know my story, and he says, "Man, you're a rock star." And his
mm.
words to me was, "If my son grows up to be anything like you, I'll be a happy father." So for
Oh,
someone that didn't have a father, right?
yeah.
We'll get into the stories here in just a bit, your story, but someone that didn't have a father, you're like, "Oh my God, I'm somebody?" Like, and
Yes.
I lived that. I wanted to become that rock star, and it gave me something to really keep pushing towards. And someone believed in me, right?
Yeah.
Another male figure at that, because I didn't have that. Sometimes we need those little things. Um,
Absolutely.
in your case, though, I want to kind of go back to the beginning of it all because
Yeah.
another thing that we share is that we're both adopted by our aunts. What do you
Yeah.
remember most about the moment your aunt stepped in?
So it's so interesting, and I don't know if this is just true to culture. My family origin is really from the southern and kind of impoverished parts of Louisiana and Arkansas. So my birth mother was actually born in Winsboro, Louisiana, a very impoverished kind of town, and she was one of 8 siblings. And what's interesting is there was a practice I think that was common, particularly in the South with Black culture, is that if parents weren't quite equipped and ready to be parents at the time, my dear granny, grandmother might raise the baby. And so that was a common practice. And so I grew up believing that my mother was always my mother. It wasn't, and probably until I was about 7 or 8, where there was just some exchange of story where I came to find out that I was adopted. My birth mother had reached out and called my adopted mother, who was her and is her biological sister. And she, in a moment of just needing support, knew that she could rely on family. Didn't want to go through the system if she didn't have to, and just made a call. And what I love about the courage and the heroism that is my adopted mother. So she started out as my aunt, and today she is my mother. She was on her way up from Louisiana to Kansas City. She was a recruit in the late 60s. She had put herself through college, straight A student, went to Southern, had become a statistical engineer. And so she was getting ready to work for an aerospace plant in Kansas City in the late 60s. Like, it is the whole Hidden Figures story in
Yeah,
reality.
yeah, for
But
sure.
she had a life and a goal and a trajectory that was climbing. And then all of a sudden, she got the phone call from her sister. And instead of saying no, instead of saying, let me think about it, she said, I will do it. And she said, the condition is I'm going to adopt this child as mine. I sometimes think about the fear, the courage, just the emotion that happened between those two women in that conversation. And it gives me goosebumps because talk about the epitome of selflessness and
Mm,
sacrifice. Talk about the epitome of courage to say, I will take this child as my own and she will know no different. So I think the beautiful part to answer your question is while it took me a while to really understand my adoption story,
mm,
I do believe my biological mother, there was some perhaps thought of shame that it was a bad thing that she gave her child away. If you think about how people and families tell adoption stories today,
mhm.
they make books and it's an anniversary and it's a whole celebrated thing. And
Right.
I didn't have that. And so I think the takeaway just from that memory of how it probably took several years, if not decades, to take piece by piece and understand the story was adoption is such a beautiful thing. And
Mhm.
if it's necessary to create a safe, healthy, restorative environment in which a child can be raised, let's do it. Like it's not the dirty, ugly word. So not much memory of the moment it happened, but I have come to appreciate the gravity and the
Mm.
significance of that gift more than I can even convey. Yeah.